system Minnesota nó all system nữa number E University of Minnesota thì nó mà trâu luôn campus đó University of Minnesota Twin City University of Minnesota Duluth University of Minnesota Rochester University of Minnesota Wilmer University of Minnesota Crookston đây là system nữa systemที่อ้อที่ไปหอเลยจะMinnesota State System University ยังมี St. Cloud State ตอนเราช่วยยาลูยังมี Winona State มี Mankato State มี Southwest State Bemidji State ยังมี Metro State ช่วยเขาเดี๋ยวเดี๋ยวมีไปเจ้าอาลู Community College และ Technical College ยังอ้อ system เนี่ยrồi nhớ Minnesota là trong lãnh đạo nhớ thì khảo vào trong cái khảo vào đây đúng không? UC system, UC Berkeley, UC LA, UC San Diego, UC Riverside, UC Santa Barbara, UC Santa Cruz, UC Merced. And the other system here more California State, Fullerton. California State, LA, California State, San Diego, California State, Sacramento, California State, Northridge. Thì mình cả tên là phải ở họ nó. Thì cú sa cả bây giờ sao mình cả bây giờ mình có system nữa. Thì họ nói mình State University á, sai cho private nữa. Mình cho State University nữa cả bên cả share thì có responsibility là lưu rô de chính phủ nè, gạo mình giá trị, thì có responsibility để xây giá trị nữa, hoặc the private thì chỉ you take you not sure, bây giờ nên từ tôi thả thì Jonathan Bong giờ bây tôi làm bây giờ bây họ Minnesota State System, giờ bây xa luôn university năng cầu bây giờ alu community college technical college cho budget cho University of Minnesota thì bây giờ budget trong tiền của tôi mới tới chỉ đó là nè, tức là lu University of Minnesota mà more research cho mình sẽ mà more application chỉ cho research có different hơn đó chứ chỉ vì then John giờ tôi làm về chỉ every 2 years to governor ở chỗ allocate chỉ nhiều là pay all system nó chỉ John represent pay John một lobby chỉ bây giờ professor nó là bây mấy lúc bây giờ inter faculty union organization giờ bây giờ union bây mà sao là chỉ cụ thể nhau government relation chỉ giờ chúng mình lobby chỉ cho tụi chị bây giờ bây thể hiện nữa bây professional lobbies you know bắt to cái chỉ ecosystem thì chỉ là K-12 education K nó không có họ nói chỉ là một ecosystem là chỉ như là của school board thì của bao thì là nên bây giờ tao thì họ K-12 là elementary and secondary ở home university một số là high ed thì mình cần là phải upper nữa thìความรับผิดชอบđể chính phủ giờ lý trả nữa từ thể nhiên thì tôi bây giờ mong bây giờ bao họ nói kia bây giờ bao nữa bây giờ bao mình cả họ cần tới nó chia như một cái lớp kia đấy phần chùa vô cho thêm mấy chế cần tới khen tới rong vô chụp mấy nhiệt dầu là vô cho chế cần tới bố mấy chế nhiệt dầu là thể salary trên cái giò này nhá đâu tôi số bé tôi nhiệt dầu bình nữa chế cần tới bù rong trên building bù rong mua cho program motivate bé chuẩn cả xe cái chế nhau mình sụt ta nó vậy nó sẽ tích nó là one of the best state sẽ cái cần tới rong hay only nhá đã cắt tên này, giờ deep south nhá là Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, Florida nào lấy theo you know what? We're on number 1 in college football, but we rank funding. We're number 15 funding. To Governor Bobon Harley to Governor nhá đã Mississippi này chứ, cũng chỉ xa cái biết tao thi football, cũng tao thi cái đầu nữa nè. thì họ bên là ở phố bảo vệ tao thấy thế sẽ biết education trong anh, họ là bên cái gì cái xe nè có tí vì cha qua lên đó nhau bên này ya thôi bên vào thôi qua school board na bên vào tôi lo Allen High School brand new $7 million mới chân lát nhớ là để West Virginia nó Virginia thì bên mà Waterloo School trong một cái là kỳ đó bên chúng nhiệt giàu nè bên chúng cái xe cho nó nè chúng cái xe giờ cái lúc chỉ cần đợi chỉ trong chỉ muốn bên này trong chỉ cần đợi chỉ trong nè chỉ nhớ là thổi cũng một dòng latte nè cũng phải nhớ latte dòng latte cũng tên mà siêu wow tập bên chỉ vào mấy latte đấy à chỉ cần đợi chỉ con nè bé thế nè cũng phải nhớ latte nè nhớ Hà Nội nhớ Sài Gòn nè rồi giờ bên này trong chỉ trong nè Premier nè rồi giờ MBA rồi trong nè cũng phải Tết chỉ cần đợi trong chỉ trong nè rồi mới nhớ chỉ cần đợi trong cán đấy chỉ tu sát khi thế tôi khi là sự đợi trong chỉ bên cái gì đó nè bên cái gì thì bên tao khai thì cần đó liền nè cái kia rồi cái trong là chúng mình nhớ thì nhớ trong mua cho program trong mua cần đó ý không này chỉ cho lên ý tụi này cô chỉ muốn là sao tụi này không đó bây mua cái đấy không nó cổ lên cô sao cô tôi nhớ cái không được ra chỉ biết sao cũng mớiตัวอย่างnày nè nhớ tao không mua hai à một cái AP Calculus, AP Composite English, ít tụi này không nó bao giờ trâu tụi cần đó nè, AP Biology, AP Calculus, cái tụi này cũng phải bao giờ trâu tụi này tụi không mua hai, cũng mới cho bên St. Paul Academy, ít tụi này cũng nó phải chỉ là nó cổ lên nè, tụi cần đó tụi you know the answer right? Chỉ lần cỡ tụi này cũng mà tàu cha bao giờ trâu lần cỡ tụi này cũng nè chỉ với tụi này cũng kia bể không một hai mấy nhốt thì tiền mất tao ấy giờ với tụi này cũng kia bể sang Paul Academy mà ơi kia tao rồi giờ chân một nữa là chỉ tụi cả tao đợi bé chúng tao cho nó bé tôi chìm blame này chỉ mình chỉ tin là cái xe chỉ là bao tiền của yếu chế của nhóc họ từ nhóc là mấy tiền tiền sai mong giờ cá này giờ tôi cá thật giỏi nhỉ đó cáiอย่างcó mongหา cá tôi cả tôi PhD chemistry thì cá ta cô Neal có ba của tôi PhD chemistry là chỉ là offer cho họ lựa quý cho nhá North Dakota it's a Pennsylvania it's a Michigan cũng một Michigan về ta lu firm này giờ top firm cũng một research ta chỉ có bao giờ nó cũng bao cũng mình ta lúc trẻ có chơi rong chỉ cần để rong sao cũng chỉ nhớ lại rồi nó thấu cũng nào bao là cái ta you know biết nên ta sai yếu chế không từ lúc đấy chỉ cần để rong sao bé chúng ta tao nè giờ bé chúng ta tao cho nó giờ bé chỉ bao thì mình cái rong chả còn nó chia thua hay có chân vậy cho mình cảm mấy nhia cho mình cảm mấy loại hoa nâng đủ nâng đây nâng spray đấy à là giờ bao là kia nhiều mà tao wow bé bao thì coi là bé bao là chỉ cần đi giống cái nhà là thì no mới cho cần là cái tao tụi A đấy xia thì xem bao lớn tụi B đó là thì bên cả xia bé xin cả xia chỉ là tao để diploma thì bé dùng xia cái đấy xia chạy vô để diploma để chúa này rồi lúc để tiền à bé dùng cả xia cái đó nè giờ bé chỉ cái bé chỉ bao tiền giờ lên đó uyang mana untuk punji nahai ta ni je kuma malah lưới dân gì John when you take over I want you to address about the funding of particular high ed first I did cover a little bit about K-12 I'm going to do more on K-12 but I will to touch about like on my email like education administration particular high ed what is the responsibility at the state how much we get funding from the Fed because basically, a lot of immigrants don't understand because back in Southeast Asia, we're Department of Education, Ministry of Education.
You hear me? There we go. All right, it works. I'm going to stand also next to the podium so you can see me. Otherwise, I'll be hidden behind there. Welcome. My name is Jonathan Bone. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been fortunate enough to work with Dr. Thao and Dr. Yang now for about 10 years with the union. I've been around the Capitol for 20 years. This is my 20th legislative session, and it's what my family does. My dad was a commissioner of a few agencies, a longtime lobbyist. My little sister is a lobbyist for BNSF, and she's a lawyer, so we have one in the family, which makes that enough. So I didn't go to law school, but it's a pleasure for me to be here. It's still kind of shocking that I get to stand in front of groups like this and talk about higher ed. I barely got into college, but really found my calling and found my passion in college, and was able to find a path through politics and through public policy, and have been thankful to have made a difference in a lot of people's lives through this work. So in Minnesota, and I'm going to touch on some things that Dr. Thao wanted me to touch on. And in Minnesota, prior to 1980, the state paid 80% of the total cost for students to attend a state college or state university. In 1982, there was a budget deficit, and there was a deal struck where higher ed funding got cut, and at that time, the state actually put in a statute that it was their goal to fund 2/3 of the total cost of education in Minnesota for universities and colleges. And they maintained that goal. They maintained that funding until 2003. Governor Pawlenty took over. There was a large budget deficit that his first biennium, and they dramatically cut higher education and continued to dramatically cut higher education until 2013. So in those 10 years, that ratio flipped. And so 2/3 of the cost fell to the students and to their families, and 1/3 was paid by the state. So when you hear about the dramatic increase in student debt, you hear about the dramatic increase in college, it's not that college has actually become more expensive. The data is pretty clear. Adjusted for inflation, the price has actually gone down. It's just that the government made a conscious decision to disinvest and put more of the onus on families and on students to pay. So what we've been doing the last decade is trying to, 12 years now, is trying to flip that ratio again. We've gotten back to about 50-50. We've seen record investments, especially 2 years ago. Over $200 million went back into the institutions, which helped to freeze tuition for 2 years without causing massive cuts on campuses. And also passed an exciting new program called the North Star Promise. And I hope some of you have heard of that. It's really targeted toward first-generation college students, people that had maybe not thought college was an option for them. And what this program does is it provides tuition-free access to a college university in Minnesota, in a state institution, so University of Minnesota system or the Minnesota state system, for any family or individual that earns under $80,000 a year. And so that is a huge improvement from some of the state aid programs that we had previously. And just in the last year, it went into effect in 2024, and just in the last year, we've seen an increase in enrollment around the state over 17%. And so it just proves that the access barrier has not been that college is not worth it anymore, which is a common refrain from some folks in the media and some folks in politics, but it really has just been the cost has been prohibitive, and we've tried to take away some of those barriers, and thankfully it's led to a lot more students entering our institutions and hopefully earning a degree. In Minnesota, it's especially important that students have access at any point in their lives. Georgetown University did a study that was released a few years ago that showed that by 2030, 75% of the jobs in Minnesota are going to require some type of higher education credential, whether that's a 2-year degree, 4-year degree, a welding certificate, something like that. So our economy is really built on the types of jobs that require some type of higher education. So it's extremely important that as many of our citizens, many of the residents of Minnesota get into college and have some type of credential so they can effectively pursue their dreams in our state. Right now, the latest data that I saw out of the US Treasury is that a college graduate earns over $1.2 million more than a non-college graduate in the US. So if you're ever wondering if a $30,000 or $40,000 investment over 4 years is worth it, your net return over your life is going to be, on average, well over $1 million. And so it's so important that people have access. I talked about the state programs. There's other state programs that exist as well. For example, if you qualify, you can get help with daycare. You can get daycare grants. The state runs loan programs, which are low interest rates, below prime interest rates. They have work study through the federal government, so if you qualify, you can actually work on campus and earn money toward your tuition at that way. And so there are a lot of opportunities to access college, even with the prices going up. And so at the federal government, I will say that there are some things happening right now with the federal government that you've probably heard about. And we have yet to see how exactly some of the dramatic changes that are being done the U.S. Department of Education will impact higher education spending. But we our students rely pretty heavily on something called the Pell Grant, which is a federal grant for low-income students. The maximum grant right now is $7,395 a year. So if you are, I think, below $40,000 a year in income, you qualify for virtually all of that, which pays almost all of the tuition at a state university in Minnesota. And then to couple with that, in Minnesota, we have what's called the state grant program. And they work together very well. So if you qualify for a large amount of the Pell Grant, you'll get a small amount of state grant to help fill the void between what tuition is and what the Pell Grant offers. But if you have a slightly higher income and you qualify for less of the Pell Grant, the state grant actually helps to make up some of that difference as well. So, so we try to reduce the debt load that students are taking on and provide additional opportunities for students who are kind of in this donut hole middle where perhaps you or your parents earn enough money to have a comfortable middle class life, but with the increasing cost of college, actually attending and expecting your parents to contribute to the cost of college is not a reality. And so the state grant is really meant to fill that void for some of those folks. It is our goal in the next several years, even with a hard state budget, to increase the $80,000 max of the North Star Promise to higher, to 90, 100, 125,000. So we really have access for any student that's interested. Another exciting thing that we passed 2 years ago is called the North Star Promise Plus, and this is the first of its kind in the country. It is money where if you qualify for the Pell Grant and you attend a state institution, you'll actually get cash on top of tuition to help pay for things like housing or books, transportation, the myriad of other things that are expensive and, again, make it great barriers for students to attend college. And so this is, say you qualify for $7,000 of the Pell Grant, you get $3,500 a year on top of tuition to help cover those expenses. And that is slated to last 3 to 4 years, depending on when the money runs out, but we're hoping to make that permanent over the next several years as well. And so no other state has done anything like that. We're excited about that. It's something that also the media doesn't talk about often. It's not something you hear about, but we were excited to do that. And we hear from students continuously, it's not just tuition. It's housing is expensive. Food packages are expensive. You're expected to work now virtually full-time. I worked full-time through college, and my dad would always talk about when he went to MSU Mankato, he worked at a shoe store over the summer. It's where he met my mom. She was his boss. She was relentless. And they were able to earn their tuition just working at the shoe store over the summer because the expectation was the state was funding so much of it. And that is not a reality anymore. Almost every student is working. Most of them are working over 30, almost 40 hours a week or more. And unfortunately, that really takes away from the experience of college. It takes away from your ability to dig into issues that you may not know you've been interested in, or to really engage yourself with the faculty, engage yourself with your classmates in really developing your critical thinking skills and finding your passions and being able to develop skills outside of the workforce that become so valuable in the workforce. So, done a lot of exciting things. However, a lot of this is at risk now. With the federal changes, we're assuming that the Pell Grant may face cuts as part of government reductions, government spending reductions. In addition to that, we're concerned that if they don't face cuts, that there's going to be ties where institutions will become ineligible if they do any type of equity work. And in Minnesota, we take great pride in the equity work that we do. Minnesota State is currently engaged in a 10-year process called Equity 2030, where we are trying to make our institutions more welcoming to first-generation students, students of color, low-income students, all of the different groups that have been shut out of higher education for a long time in our country and in our state. And making our campuses more welcoming, but also making them work better for everyone that's there. And so we're concerned that we will have to scale back some of that work because of what's happening at the federal government. But we're hopeful that Congress trips over themselves trying to pass that bill, trying to pass a reconciliation bill, and maybe nothing happens. But we're committed to that work in Minnesota, and we've already seen improvements the last several years, and we're looking forward to closing some of the gaps of both racial equity gaps, but also low-income student gaps, and creating opportunities for degrees to be earned by all different folks. Any questions? Yeah. Dr.
I got a question about if the Trump administration eventually dismantles. So my question is that, let's say if the Trump's administration eventually dismantles the Department of Education and then shifting the educational responsibilities to the state. And my question is that how would the states do financially to help the low-income students, and what would be the impact if the state handled the issue of education, especially higher education? How would the state do to maintain the grant for low-income students or student of college and so forth?
Great question. The education department at the federal level is the pass-through for the Pell Grant. They handle most of the funding there. If the Pell Grant were to get cut, it would mean dramatic cuts in opportunities for students in Minnesota, all low-income students. Right now, the state receives a couple $100 million from the federal government that goes directly to students. I keep saying the state receives it, but students within Minnesota receive this money, and the money follows them to whatever institution they choose. And if that were to happen, we would see a dramatic exodus of students from our institutions, and the opportunity to achieve a higher education credential would be diminished for generations of students. And it would have a very serious impact, especially in Minnesota, because of the high number of jobs that we have that require some specialized skill or specialized training. So if they do that, in addition to TRIO grants, which are something that are specifically targeted toward first-generation college students and low-income college students, to help them, in addition to tuition funding, help them set up with coaches and be engaged in a way that not every student has an opportunity to. Those are things that are at risk, and that's just on the student side. Now, if we talk about the institution side, the National Institute of Health just went through basically freezing all of their grants. So the University of Minnesota, Duluth, will lose about 1/3 of their funding because of that, which means they'll lay off an exceptional number of faculty. They will stop admitting students into undergraduate, graduate, PhD research programs. We're already seeing that across the country. Students who had a scholarship or had an opportunity to attend a PhD program are either getting picked up by police in masks and sent away, or they're now being, their positions are being cut at the schools, so they're not actually going to be able to attend. And we're going to lose a generation of researchers. We're going to lose a generation of research. And it's going to have very, very serious impacts on higher education. And quite frankly, the state does not have the resources to make that up. It will be money that will simply be gone. In Minnesota, I've talked about the kind of the percentages of funding, but through the 90s, higher education spending in Minnesota made up about 12 to 15% of the total state budget. Right now, higher education is about 6%. So we are competing consistently against dramatically increasing costs in healthcare is the biggest one. We've seen the biggest growth in healthcare costs. But also things like K-12, continued to get more expensive. Because higher education has this second form of resources in tuition, politically, we're an easy target to cut. And what has happened, from 2003 to now, is that we've been cut so dramatically that we priced out many, many, many students across the state. And if we lose federal funding in the way that it looks like we may, we will just, push the goalpost further away for more and more students.
Maybe. President Trump dismantle ya more chipu federal law Department of Education la ya more impact ya. Kana ya political. My answer will be very much political argument because that's political statement. It's political ideology. Okay. Mikate na. Beto in the Ekala in the Baho should say it's a sharp or sharp job. Jaya Lute Ankit to Cape. Jetta to Ekala, it's a ye poor Jojo Sha Megama Walu Department of Education. If you take a Megana, I believe it there. The Gakan you what to cite. Not about to cite, generally. Jetta Lower Tao Mikato Ekalan, Demika say, oh, Yalu, in Germany, all young kid, pay a fucky. Young kid Yang, the general to the other Anki, the Jong, and Kito. Then English become the official language. Tana, Joe Visana, Lama Side, the Yale, pay your fucky to system, German to system, Anki to the pay to now the signer. Đó là finalize cái tàu cơ, nó mới chọn chơi mà tụi này nhớ đâu là, cái nó tàu cha nhớ đâu là, nó cho phát kỳ tụi là nhớ thế, chỉ là do ăn kít tụi, chỉ tất cả nó, nó mà chỉ mấy cái giá trị cần đó, especially cho high end đó, ya private school ở đây đó, Harvard, Yale ở đây nè, Harvard, Yale thì lâu nè, pay tụi cần tới này Yale nè, cho nên nhất là chưa lâu nè. Lúc mà xé nhân tông bên New Hampshire cho long là qua lúc bên đây là qua lúc mua chơi lúc qua cho chị mua cho từ phải mới chơi nhau là phần à how vừa lấy giờ tí cho nên chúng tôi qua chơi bên sảnh của tôi qua chơi bên sảnh qua giờ tất cả nó lúc mà mua reform chơi thế thì giờ lấy California thế lúc mà chơi bên tôi chơi chơi rồi chơi lúc thì qua lúc Calais William and Mary rồi giờ lúc number 8 Ivy League thế thì giờ public lúc Di California mà qua chơi UC thì giờ là model giờ tụi tin năng chỉ thì giờ lên đây mình cả thấy suy nghĩ cả government law control còn nó political issue thì giờ đi ít sẽ cho bồi gì giàu thì bên họ tuổi à President Carter thằng nó term suốt thái nè nhưng mà là chỉ lúc Department of Education one thing đó nè lúc HEW Health Education Welfare nè bây lúc nào là lúc cái xuồng lúc Department sư chỉ thầu các đời xong cần gọi chỉ các đời qua lúc Department of Education thì President Reagan mà là UA tụ Terry Blanche ní tụ Mormon ní tụ tại Utah đời vacancy là what the third Secretary of Education giờ lên nó có political climate ta xin nó giờ lên nó bao giờ lu tây chờ cả mua giò cả nơi rong thì mình cái gì lu à mình cả lúc tới chơi khả năng hay support đây phần tao giờ họ nữa là sao mà dismantle chỉ bung mua mình vì K-12 mình cả cho test score khi lại đâu là có political argument đó nè bao giờ lúc tới chơi mình cả lúc là per pupil này thì là mới sai chạy về state thì giờ có một cần tới này ít tụi cái đó tao cũng nhiều bọn nó lúc per pupil Saint Paul ý trong biết tao cầu chia nè, tao qua school nè, Minneapolis giờ cầu ốp hạ nè, giờ khó funding nè, thể nhiên giờ tôi có thể biết tao mà bên cái sao, federal government thể gì, percent gì đó cầu ốp percent nè, chúa cho ốp percent nhà state the local responsibility, tôi mà đền 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 này á, đi chơi trong nè, tao nói nhớ đã, Saint Paul school bây mua nè, ok, local responsibility na ne khoya yi đó có opposite chúa cho opposite nhà state thì lúc rồi đó thì state này ya xa cho percent na xa cho ít percent nhà mình sata na lúc nhà bị cắt tên na họ cần tới especially K-12 the number one responsibility ya lúc state bây giờ nhân tàu sáp là bây khử tàu là mua xí là nó sẽ cái đó là K-12 là cho nó là nó cũng mới cho